Judge Lilly will become fed up with the lawlessness in Perry County. With the deaths of John Campbell, Shade Combs, and Elijah Morgan due to the Eversole takeover of Hazard, enough had become enough. Several letters between Judge Lilly, Kentucky Governor S.B. Buckner, and Captain J.M. Sohan would become exchanged concerning the problem with the two feuding factions. The lack of understanding on the part of Sohan and Buckner would lead to the Battle of Hazard, Kentucky on November 7th and 8th of 1889. Come along with us as we discovered what happened during this fateful 2 days in Appalachian history. All aboard the Kentucky-Tennessee Living Time Machine. Please fasten your seatbelts and keep your arms and legs inside of the vehicle at all times. But to get going, we need your help. We still need to fire up that time machine to transport us. Please help us by clicking on the like, subscribe, and bell notification buttons down below. Not only does this fire up the time machine, but it convinces YouTube that we need a bigger time machine to reach more people who love history as much as you do. Now, back to our story. The replacement of Judge Lilly. As we have seen, Judge Lilly had written a letter to Governor S.B. Buckner for the help with the situation in Perry County. Perry County had split into two violent factions, and the residents of Hazard feared for their very lives. The death of Elijah Morgan stirred up more unease in the county, as the Eversole faction had sealed up Hazard, Kentucky, and barred the entry of anyone who did not have the password on pain of death. Judge Lilly secured 45 state guards to Perry County by court order so that the court business could be maintained for the November 1888 session. While the troops were there for a year, order was maintained and the court was allowed to have a peaceful session. During the spring term of 1889, several indictments were handed down against law violators. This would bring them into Judge Lilly's courtroom during the November 1889 session. However, in November of 1889, the troops were recalled and Perry County was once again left to its own devices. Because of the belief that the Home Guards would be able to handle the growing escalation of the threat of violence in Perry County, Judge Lilly refused to appear in his own courtroom under those conditions. A special election was then held, and Honorable W. L. Hurst was seated as the pro tem judge. The Battle of Hazard. The following will cover the dates of November 7th and 8th of 1889 in the Perry County Circuit Courtroom. Honorable W. L. Hurst will be presiding. Everything seemed to go very peacefully and quietly as the first 3 days of court handled unimportant business. The night of the third day of court, however, there was a significant disorder and chaos. On the fourth day of court, before noon of that day, a heavy volley of shots would ring out that cold November morning. It seems that a man named Campbell and his friends were having a wonderful time at a place named Graveyard Hill that overlooked the downtown Hazard community. They were drinking moonshine and having fun playing poker. It seems that Campbell decided to add to his fun by standing beside of a tree and shooting his pistol. There was a store at the upper end of Hazard owned by Mr. Davison. As soon as Davison heard the shots being fired, he looked out of the rear window of the store to see Campbell waving around his still smoking pistol in the air. Davison then grabbed his Winchester rifle, took aim, fired, and Campbell fell to the ground dead. These shots were heard in the courtroom during the morning session of court. Everyone fell silent and looked to each other for answers. With an unheard command of stampede, everyone, including the judge, lawyers, jurors, and officials, and bystanders, suddenly got up on their feet and ran for the exits. No one had taken the time to find out what the cause of the great commotion was all about. They just figured that the feud was reignited and it was time to leave town as quickly as possible. The crowd scattered in all directions. There were some that sought protection in the courthouse walls and stairways of the building. Others ran out of town without so much as a word as they hurried on their way. The two factions quickly began to form again, and after the first stampede of human flesh had abated, they began to ascertain on what action they should take next. The Eversoles ran back into the courthouse and took possession of the building. There were two of the French faction still inside of the building on the upper floor by the name of Fields and Prophet. Both men silently locked themselves into the room and weighed their options. They quietly opened one of the windows and decided that if they jumped, it could mean a broken limb, a broken neck, or worse, death. But as soon as the Eversoles started to try to break in the door, they decided their chances and jumped out of the window. Both men landed on the ground without sustaining any injuries. But it was not over for Fields and Prophet, as the Eversoles caught on that the two men had jumped out of the window for their lives. They immediately began to open fire on the two men. They scrambled to the safety of the jailhouse, which was 15 feet away from the courthouse. Both buildings faced the same street. As Musenberg says in his book, quote, the Eversoles now passed their time in ventilating the thin brick walls of the little building. Fields and Prophet began to feel uncomfortably warm, but held the fort. They had an ample supply of ammunition and continued to pour volley upon volley into the windows through the walls of the courthouse. All through the long afternoon the guns roared. Clouds of smoke hung low and heavy over the unfortunate town. Constant was the clatter of firearms. The incessant hiss of leaden missiles was interspersed with shouts and defiant curses, while the silent terror of women and children was a pitiful sight to behold. The whole, presented as a scene, was not easily forgotten by those who were compelled to witness it. Unquote. Although there was ample ammunition that was spent as each side shot the other side, there was not reported injuries or fatalities during this gun battle. Both sides made sure that their bodies were well protected and not accidentally exposed to any gunfire. Any object in a window that was suspected of hiding a human being was shot upon. That night, the two men decided it was far better trying to make a run for safety than to face an overwhelming sneak attack at night. Both men waited for cover of darkness to fall, then kept their heads down upon their chests and made a run for it. Through a gauntlet of flying bullets, as the Eversoles trained all of their guns upon them, the two men ran through the barrage and made it safely to the French faction. When they reached their safe haven, a bunch of whooping and hollering was heard, because the Eversoles had been defeated in their cause. French had been out of town while all of this was occurring, and had arrived safely at night with his men to join the battle. For the rest of that night, each side continued shooting at each other, without an intermission. Sometime during the night, Jesse Fields and Tom Smith evaded gunshots and occupied Graveyard Hill. They saw a sunken grave that had been dug out and used it as a rifle pit, and the tombstone Smith used as a place to steady his rifle. They then opened fire upon the courthouse. The occupants of the courthouse instantly hit the wooden floors for safety. As the first rays of dawn began to appear over the mountaintops, two of the Eversoles men attempted to cross the street. Smith and Fields opened fire on the two men. J. McKnight was instantly killed while his companion made it to the other side of the road. Any attempt made by the Eversoles to return fire meant certain death. The Eversole faction soon came to the realization that the very building that they were happy to have soon became a death trap. Furniture was shot to smithereens. Wood casings and shutters were obliterated and shot away from their posts. Feeling like mice caught in a steel trap, they quickly began to formulate a plan of escape. They retreated out of the building and made their way to North Fork, Kentucky River that ran along town. Green Morris and a companion had hid themselves along the river bank to act as fire cover for the escaping Eversole faction. It did not take long for Fields and Smith to discover the men running for safety to the river bank. They picked up their guns and gave chase. Approaching the river, Morris and his companion opened fire upon Smith and Fields. Fields was shot in the arm, sustaining severe wounds, and thus ending their pursuit of the Eversoles. Sometime that evening, there was an attack upon the acting judge, Honorable W. L. Hurst. It seems that the judge had been shot at, but not wounded, and his house had a stick of dynamite thrown into it, and it blew up. His house was located on the French side of the town. We will leave this section of the feud as the Eversoles are hightailing it across the North Fork of the Kentucky River for safety, and the French side take care of their only wounded man, Fields. The Perry County Circuit Court will have a strong reaction to what happened during the Battle of Hazard, Kentucky, and a report will be sent to the governor of the state of Kentucky. Other counties will now become more involved in the feud as it begins to widen its reach. Thank you. We at Kentucky, Tennessee Living would like to thank you for watching our video series on the Appalachian Feuds. Don't forget to hit that like button, as the more likes we receive, the more likely YouTube is to suggest our videos to other viewers. Also, to receive notice when we upload a new video, be sure to subscribe and click the bell notifications. We thank you for continuing to support Kentucky, Tennessee Living as we are discovering the mysteries of Appalachian history.